dopamine addiction, and raising kids. Again, it's a constant battle. I don't want to be the parent that says, oh, you can't go on the computer, you can't have TV, and no screens, no tablet, no phone, because I just cannot imagine, which is crazy that I feel that way. And I believe that the average now for a 16-year-old is like 8 hours, something like that. It's really high. Like, I've been down that so many times. I don't want that feeling anymore. Today, I want to talk about dopamine and addiction and what that has done in my life and what the current challenges are that I see for myself, my family, my daughter. I'm going to get into how I parent around some of these things, how I parent myself around some of these issues, and what I see in culture and society that actually scares me. So hopefully you get something out of this. Please like the video, make a comment, subscribe, and we'll get into it. So today I want to talk about dopamine addiction and raising kids. So where do these things overlap? Now, I believe that all of us are addicted to dopamine in some form or another. And in today's environment, obviously we have the phones, and that's a constant check-in, a fidget device, plus distraction from our emotions. And in my opinion, when something becomes an addiction, it is because we are using it in replacement of feeling an emotion. So it's an avoidant technique in order to feel an emotion. So probably most of the time, most people are not wanting to feel the emotion of boredom or the sensation of boredom. But there are other things, of course, that it can do. And of course, there are other things that cause dopamine other than your phone. We've got alcohol and drugs, kind of substance-based addictions, which are rather obvious. But then we also get into porn, sex, even physical activity for some. I've met some people that do have an addiction to working out, usually coupled with some sort of body dysmorphia. You know, they eat a taco that's 350 calories and they have to get on the treadmill and walk off or run off or exercise off 350 calories until the machine says it's 350 calories that they've burned, or Whoop or Apple device or something like that. So a form of anorexia, basically. Something that makes us feel better, but mostly when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about the phone specifically and screens. So that could be Netflix, it could be, like I said, fidgeting on your phone, either watching videos on your phone, TikTok, Instagram, social media, anything that really distracts you from doing life in the real world. And the reason this has come up for me is because I do have a 6-year-old daughter, and summer is right around the corner. She's going to be home from school, and last year battling with her to stay away from screens was particularly difficult. Now, when she's in school all day, obviously there's some screen time that they do some exams and learning activities in their computer lab, but for the most part, obviously they're not on screens. It's when she comes home from school that we have to start monitoring and limiting the screen time as much as possible. And last year I was pregnant, which was a great excuse for me at that time. And now my excuse is I have I have a baby that I'm constantly having to follow around the house, make sure he's not killing himself, or have someone there to help me manage both of them, manage Ava and do some sort of an activity with her or take her somewhere. I have realized that as long as I get out of the house we are away from screens for the most part. I have not gotten her an iPad or her own phone. She is 6 and she's in first grade, and there are other kids in her class that do already have their own phone. Many of them already have their own iPad at home. And although I do understand why people do it, I personally have decided not to do it at all with my daughter. Not to say that I'm not going to give in at some point, but I'm just trying to delay it as much as I can. I do let her play with my phone, especially if we are going out to dinner or something like that, and it's a long dinner with other adults. And of course, after about 30 minutes, she's done with her food, she's bored, and she's wanting to take up all of the attention of all of the adults in some sort of annoying way. And I have to be honest that most of the time I just say, okay, here's mommy's phone, just like let us have an adult conversation. Now, that is because of other people mostly. Obviously, it's for myself, relief for myself to not have to worry about managing any kind of outbursts or annoyance or loudness that comes from the child, but it's also for the other people around us who may not have kids or obviously maybe got a babysitter to go out, things like that. And of course we do get babysitters to go out, but let's be honest, 1, it's expensive, and then 2, I want her to learn how to like go out to dinner and try different things and be around adults. I think it's really good for her. And some of our dinner adventures or our dinner dates that with friends are last minute, and it's nothing that I can plan. Or my daughter actually looks at our friends as her friends too, and if she gets left out, she's going to be rather upset. So definitely balancing that. Now that she's gotten older, I do try to have her stay off the phone more and more when we're at dinner. When she was younger, it was kind of like, okay, here's the phone, eat your dinner, get off the phone while you eat, and then you can go back on it. Or of course I'll color with her if the restaurant has anything that she can color with. So my point in going through all that exhaustively and kind of explaining what I try to do, of course, although it's not perfect, it's a balancing act. I don't want to be the parent that says, oh, you can't go on the computer, you can't have TV, and no screens, no tablet, no phone, because I realize that we're going into a world where that is going to be something that she uses on a regular basis. And so her knowing how to use it as a tool is good. On the other hand, I do understand why people just say 0, none at all, because again, it's a constant battle. So if it's not there as an option at all, I could see how it's really nice to not have the battle with the child. If just all of the TVs are out of the house, then you're not having to battle with them over when they can watch Netflix or their YouTube show. And the other thing I've realized is YouTube is so big for the littles. I mean, that's all they want to watch. It's pretty crazy. You give them the option for YouTube or Netflix, they're choosing YouTube, which is rather interesting. Then it comes down to, okay, if you eliminate television, then you, the adult, also have to eliminate that. And that isn't something that's going to happen in our house, not because of me, because my husband, there's no way that he's going to give up his movies. I could hear him now. He's like, I work all day, do all this stuff, bust my ass. I just want to zone out and watch a movie, which is, again, totally understandable. He's not sitting there. Never seen him sit all day and watch anything ever. He might watch a movie at night. He'll get into habits where he watches one every night before he falls asleep. And goes to bed, and that's that. Where me, I just stay away from it. And I remember when I did give up series, so any kind of series on the television, I don't know if it's just naturally part of being human, or if I have a particularly more obsessive personality. I would imagine it's the latter. I notice that if I get into a series, I tend to want to binge watch it and watch it until there's no more to watch and obsess on it until it's done. And then I'm tired, I'm exhausted, usually disappointed in the series in some way, even though it might be a great series and well done, everything. The endings are always anticlimactic because they want you to stay around for the next series. It never ends the way that you think it should. And at this point, I am afraid to go off into the woods and be without a phone for a week or even a day. I just cannot imagine, which is crazy that I feel that way. I am old, according to probably most people on YouTube, 40 years old. And I remember a time where I did not give a flying F whether or not I left my phone at home. 16 years old, stupid Nokia phones about this big with the big antenna on the end was the first phone that most people had. And I remember just having it because my parents felt that they wanted to know where I was going. I was 16. They wanted me to be able to call them if I was running late or whatever. And I remember leaving my phones behind all the time and just being like, oh, I left my phone, whatever. I've got no leash, kind of feeling. As soon as the iPhone came out, I was like that for several years until the phone apps really got developed. So when they first came out, there wasn't really, people weren't using, like maps hadn't come out yet. It wasn't used for everything yet. It was mostly a phone that was a mini computer that you could do all these extra things on, and it was easier to text. You didn't have to hit, 3 times to get to a C. Had an actual keypad. There were other ones that had keypads before this, but they were like a slide out. It had to be an actual keypad rather than a screen on a phone. It was the first phone that was like 100% touch screen and integrated the feels of a computer. And there were several years where I didn't feel like I needed my phone, and then the phone became the navigation system. The phone became your music. If you got in the car, you wanted to listen to music, then podcasting, right? If you wanted to learn something while you were driving around, which I did quite a bit. I was in sales. I put 40 to 50,000 miles a year on my car, driving all over and flying. It's nice to have something to listen to. And so the phone, for obvious reasons, was really great to have. And so it became something that I felt that I needed all the time. I am more auditorily addicted, and I'm interested to see kind of what the different science is on listening to something and being stimulated that way versus watching and listening. I would imagine it's not as mindless doing it that way, but that's like saying a documentary is 100% mindless. I mean, it's not. It's leading you through, and you have to actively think about what the actual opinion, critically think about the information that's being presented to you and whether or not it is relevant to the conclusions that they're coming to. So documentaries tend to have a conclusion that they're leading you through, over a 1 to 2 hour period. And at the end of it, they're like, okay, now I've given you all this information. I led you down the road and it comes out of this funnel. And this is our conclusion. And this is what we think that you should think about this particular topic. And sometimes it's fairly accurate and sometimes it's not, or they leave out certain things, or the studies that they present aren't very good. And some people just take it at face value and say, okay, this documentary, it showed me, I saw the pictures, I saw the things, I heard the interviews, and this is what it is. Where I try to stay actively engaged throughout that entire documentary to try to not let that happen. And if I want to learn more about it, then I'll go off and learn more and find the counter argument. Again, another reason why I don't really watch documentaries, because it comes, I don't want someone else's opinion to be, I don't want to be indoctrinated by someone else, really. So I find that if I listen and let my brain meander during like a podcast or something like that, it feels more intellectually stimulating for me. And I can also Google things in the middle of it, maybe look at things on my phone in that way, and learn, I feel, more effectively. So I don't know that I'm addicted to my phone. I guess I am addicted to my phone. I don't use social media. I've recently cut off social media because I don't like the scrolling. I don't like the thoughts that come into my brain while I'm scrolling. It's usually comparing, and I don't like that because I don't feel that it's an authentic comparison. I see myself and all my flaws. I'm with myself 24/7. So I know how disgusting I am every time I lie, every time I don't pick up the thing, all of my bad habits, I know all those things about me. On social media, the only thing that we know about the people that we're watching is what they want you to see or what they think that you want them to show you, which is a very, very strange psychological phenomenon that is happening. Of course, we have always presented ourselves in ways socially that are where we are behaving the way that we think that other people want us to behave. So that has always happened, but I feel like it's magnified with social media. So we're not just doing it with the person that we're with one-on-one, we're doing it to this group of people we're imagining in our minds and what those people would want based off of the information we have from the news, from other social media accounts we watch, whatever influences we allow in on a day-to-day basis. So one thing that I've done to mitigate the whole dopamine thing is eliminate social media. So I will post out, but I don't click on the apps. I haven't been. I don't know how long it's been. I think it's been months now, something like that. Now, with children, it's a whole other animal. Obviously, their brains aren't fully developed. They can't go through all of these thoughts like I just did in regards to why I do this, why I don't do that. All they know is that their show is on there and they like it, and they're getting dopamine from it. Now, this excessive dopamine, if you take it away, so let's say the kid is used to X amount of hours a day on screens. And I believe that the average now for a 16-year-old is like 8 hours, something like that. It's really high, okay? If they're used to, let's say, 3 hours a day of screen time, and you eliminate it, they are going to have some sort of a detox. They're going to be more tired the next day. It's very similar to coming off of caffeine or nicotine or some sort of a stimulant. In my opinion and in what I've observed with her and what I've observed with myself, I don't really understand all the mechanistic actions of why that is. Obviously, there's some dopamine released when we're drinking coffee and nicotine and stimulants. So I would imagine that is one of the reasons. But also, I've noticed that if she watches over a certain amount of television or game time or whatever, if it goes past, let's say, about an hour, if I just got distracted and I'm like, oh shit, she's like, it's been over an hour, like, let's get her off, I have to ease her off. Otherwise, there's a complete meltdown. If there's a complete cutoff, it's like a drug. Like, we're cutting you off right now. Oh my gosh, you're still on there. Get off right now. And she is more likely to have a meltdown where I'm like, okay, you've got 5 minutes. You've been on there way too long. I try to explain to her it's not good for your brain. This is not good. You've got to take a break. It's not good for your eyes. I am constantly trying to state why mommy is getting her off. I think it's good for kids to understand why it's there and then, or that it's there and that it feels good in the moment, but that we have to learn to discipline ourselves to step away from it. Similar to food. So obviously we get food addiction is another thing that I failed to mention. Obviously we all have to eat. We can't completely cut it off. I mean, we can cut off certain types of food like refined sugars or industrial foods, which I highly recommend cutting those out as much as possible. Anything that comes in a bag or any plastic wrap is probably industrialized food. Highly manufactured food is going to be a higher dopamine hit than a whole food. So whole food, meats, vegetables, rice, potatoes, even popcorn. I was talking about this with a friend. She was like, what about popcorn? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. It's just a kernel that gets popped. You know, it's like, it depends on what shit you put on it. But for the most part, popcorn's a whole food. It's just corn popped. It's not a chip that got ground up into its teeny tiny flour and then molded into a shape that people like for some reason and a crunch texture that they even engineer it down to the sound that it makes inside of your mouth that is rewarding to your brain, which is pretty crazy. There's food engineers. It's their job to make it as addicting or as palatable as possible. So you eat more, so you buy more of the product. Highly manipulated. So anyway, stick to whole foods as much as you can. So it's a very similar to that as well with food. I don't want to tell my kids, no, you can never have candy. You can never have the cake at the party. You can never have ice cream. That's not reasonable. I'd rather have them learn how to stop than completely say you can't have it. Just what I've observed with watching people, when you take something away and you make it a forbidden fruit, they're more likely to obsess on it. And when they do get it, a binge can happen. So I don't want to completely restrict. And I try to, I've had times where I just let her have the sugar, let her overeat, let her have the thing as much as she wants, knowing that she's going to feel like shit later. And when she feels like shit later, I say, okay, you're having a meltdown. Like, get through the meltdown. She's crying, whatever. And when she's back to being conscious, not just her brain in a meltdown, not able to absorb the information that I'm saying, and she's in a state of mind where she can receive what I'm saying, like, notice how you feel right now. Why do you think that is? What did you eat today? Oh, maybe you had too much sugar. This is how we feel when I said sugar takes you up. You feel really great, but then the crash after makes us feel not so good. You definitely need to eat some protein. If you eat protein, it helps it. And I try to talk to her about other things that she can eat that will probably make her feel better next time. Like, let's try better next time. Let's try better tomorrow. We'll do better, let's go get something right now, or, whatever the solution is, and move forward, leave that thing in the dust and say, okay, we're going to try better next time. And does she overeat sugar still? Sometimes, yes. She's 6. Again, her brain is not fully developed, but I try to use those opportunities to teach her and to show her, this is why mommy didn't eat that. This is why mommy doesn't do this. This is why mommy has like 3 pieces of candy, if I have any at all. One is too many and 1,000 is never enough. A lot of times when I'm looking at candy, I'm like, I know it's going to taste good, but that bag of jelly beans, I'm going to have 3, and it's just going to make me want to eat more. Like, why would I want that feeling of just wanting more and more and more and more and more and more and more? Same thing with cigarettes, same thing with drugs. It's like, I've been down that so many times. I don't want that feeling anymore. So again, trying to find these opportunities to teach her that, not just with food, but also with screens. And it's a little bit scary for me walking around in society, and I'm not judging people because I know I do this too. Again, just something that I observe that has changed over time, and it probably seems rather obvious when I say it out loud, but when I was 16, you go to a doctor's office, you'd sit down, you'd read a magazine. Maybe you talk to the person next to you, make eye contact with them, say a passing word or two. Maybe they live in your neighborhood. I mean, you're both going to a local doctor, probably see someone in there that knows one of your relatives and have a little chat. Go to the doctor's office now, you sit down, everybody's like this. They don't even look, sorry about that. They don't even look up from their phone. And I am fearful that we are entering into a time where that interaction is going away, and that it'll be strange to say hi to another human in a lot more scenarios than it was in the past. And people are getting out of practice of talking to each other and having conversations, and the skill of carrying on a conversation and making eye contact and smiling and nodding and charisma and all these things are being lost, or not as many people have the skill. It's almost becoming rare to have the skill. Something I've noticed as well, and again, this is something that when I say it out loud, it's probably very obvious to most, but just leave the phone. Don't take it with you. So, like I said earlier, I couldn't imagine right now going somewhere for, let's say, 24 hours and not having the phone. I think that would be really hard for me. It's just my fidget device, I think. I think that's part of like the addiction, is like this fidget device. Because like I said, I'm not really watching anything. I do watch some stand-up comedy on there, and like Kill Tony and Your Mom's House and some of that sort of stuff, which there are some visual things on there. But for the most part, I just listen to most things, even those previously mentioned shows. But even though looking up the mountain, like that would be my Mount Everest, right? Being without a phone for, let's say, a week. You hear of these people going on dopamine detoxes, which is probably wonderful. Like put me in an insane asylum and lock me in a padded room with a bed. And I think that would be like, I don't know, it almost sounds like fantastic. As a mom, like, oh my God, I'd just be alone and like sit there. I would need a book or some paper, definitely writing. Anyway, yeah, going to jail sounds like a resort some days. So although being without a phone for a week sounds like, let's call that the Mount Everest, instead of having this idyllic, oh, we would have to do this. We would have to run the marathon. We'd have to climb Mount Everest. We'd have to do this big thing to get the result. I don't know that that's necessarily realistic for most of us or the case at all. And what I have started to do as a practical implement is look at my phone, and out of habit, I just grab it all the time now. And I try to catch myself in that moment and be like, I'm going inside the grocery store. Do I need the phone? Especially if I'm with my daughter. Notice if I have my phone, I'm more likely to put my earbud in and listen to something. I'm like, I justify it by, I'm learning something. I'm being productive. I'm learning something. I'm like, no, I don't. I can walk around the store, be present with my daughter, and we can try to get her to have a conversation with me. And that's that. Just leave the phone in the car. So the phone gets left in the car. And it's those little, even if it's 15-minute, 20-minute, these little walks, these little jaunts, like going in the backyard yesterday, I was going to grab my phone. I'm like, because I view it as something that's like relaxing. Like, oh, I'm going to grab my phone and go in the backyard with the kids and have my phone and like relax. No, it's probably less relaxful. I almost said relaxful. It's probably less relaxing if I grab my phone. But if I leave it, just be fully engaged with the kids, go over to the garden, rinse off the garden, spray the kids, spray the dog, make a game, your brain will find ways to entertain itself and others. At least mine usually does. If I leave the phone behind, or if I take the phone with me, it becomes a priority when it shouldn't sometimes for me. And what scares me is I am a fairly conscious person. I feel like I'm constantly analyzing my thoughts. I feel like I'm very socially aware and psychologically aware and inwardly watching my thoughts constantly. I'm like, if I'm having a hard time with this, other people have to be having a hard time with this. And maybe other people are having a hard time and aren't even aware that they're having a hard time and aren't even aware that they're asleep in a way. So we all hear of like the awakening, being awakened, being enlightened, all of those terms in the spiritual space. And I believe that there are multiple awakenings all the time. We might be asleep in one area of our life and then we have this epiphany in another and we think that, oh, we've achieved the awakening. And there's always an area that we are blind to. There's always going to be blind spots. We're never going to see it all. Our little brains can't comprehend it. We're not God. So this was an area that I started to really focus on because of my daughter. And then, of course, I always try to approach things like don't judge her, don't judge other people, and then see how you do it in yourself first before you dictate to the little person that you're in charge of. Because I find when I do that, I come to it with more empathy and I'm not so dictatorial. Like, I don't want to just like dictate to her, this is what we're doing. Like, I want to empathize with what she's going through. And I feel as though I have more tools to talk to her about it and help her digest the feelings that come up when we're making a change, when we're making that behavioral change. Because it is hard to change your behavior. It's hard to change. I mean, with behavior, it's thoughts, feelings, actions. And even before that, you've got beliefs underneath the thoughts and values and all of those subconscious underlying things that drive our thoughts, then drive our feelings, drive our actions. So it's important for me to think about and try to watch for those subconscious thoughts that I can catch from time to time to see if I can correct those and change a belief, change a false belief in there, or a belief that I just don't want to have anymore that pops up. I'm like, oh, where'd that come from? So for a person that I feel that I am constantly trying to grow, constantly trying to pay attention to my brain and my thoughts and my belief systems and assumptions and things like that. Like, if I'm struggling with this, other people have to be struggling with it too. And I do see unconsciousness around me on a regular basis, going into a space and feel like the lights are on and no one's home. Not with everybody, but I think it's with more people than it has been in the past, particularly pre-COVID. I feel that COVID was a huge social change for many people, and people got out of the practice of being around each other, and some are still not back to where they were pre-COVID, and I fear that many of them will not ever be back to where they were socially and practiced, or maybe even know that they've changed, or even trying to work on it, or even care to work on it. I fear that this is going to lead to more dementia, just soaking the brain with dopamine and allowing the brain to check out emotionally and check out in distractions in so many different ways. I feel that certain parts of the brain may be going to sleep, or, again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but just we know that if you don't use it, you lose it. And that's with muscles, that's with bones, that's with atrophy all over the place. So it's neurons, which includes the brain and the central nervous system and everything. So if you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't work on it, you're not going to grow the muscle. If you don't lift the weight and get the pump and all that, you're going to lose the muscle, and then you're certainly not going to grow the muscle. So these are all the things that I've been thinking about in this subject. Don't really have a great conclusion here, other than just laying this out on what issues I come across, what I try to do to pick up the pieces as a result of where our culture is socially currently. I don't have the great solution. It's similar to me with when people come to me with certain health insurance problems. It's like, I'm sorry, the system is broken in certain ways, and this is what I've done to work around it to the best of my ability, but I can't change the system. All I can do is be aware of the pitfalls and try to avoid them whenever possible, and navigate it that way. It's like getting through LA or something. Like, there's no straight path to where you're going, but if you go this way, this way, this way, you're going to have an easier flow of it. So thank you for hanging out until the end. If you haven't, I'd love to hear your comments, questions. How are you dealing with this? Comment down below, subscribe, like the video, and we'll see you next time.